Welcome to the Townsend Letter Podcast, innovative health perspectives since 1983. Brought to you by MycoLife, the world's best mushroom extracts. Hello, I'm Ben Moss for Townsend Letter. I'm speaking with Dr. Gary Null, a legend in radio, an acclaimed author, and a leading voice in alternative medicine for decades. Hi, Gary.
Hi, thank you. It's a very kind introduction.
Gary, I wanted to talk to you today about your most recent contribution to Townsend Letter, an article outlining RFK's potential impact on policy and specifically on the CDC. In your article, you highlight very significant failures within the CDC and the public health system more broadly. My first question to you really would be, how do we ensure that these critiques of the public health system don't lead to a distancing from the scientific method? I guess that's really the thing that came up for me when I was reading your article. I wasn't in disagreement with the different aspects of the criticisms of the CDC. I just felt like that could lead to people mistrusting science. So, in your view, do you think that there is a compatibility problem there with embracing the sort of skepticism about vaccines and even things like climate change that might impact us more broadly? Or do you think that RFK is going to be able to strike a balance between what constitutes good science, good scientific method, and also keeping the bureaucracy at bay?
I think that our CDC, as well as the FDA, USDA, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, Anthony Fauci's little kingdom for 45 years, the National Institute on Aging, National Institute on Mental Health. Altogether, there's about 9 very important agencies involving health. I think they have been absolutely perfect, 100% flawless.
Really?
Flawless in
Come
the
on.
information, in the science, if you're corrupt.
I knew there was going to be a qualifier in there.
Because they do not represent real science. One of the things I learned as a scientist, in fact, the youngest senior research fellow in the history of the Institute of Applied Biology, which itself was like the Institute of Pasteur, unique scientists from around the world came because they were offered an opportunity to challenge science itself. So everything was a challenge. And one day I went to and this is a way of answering your question with an example, I went to the monthly meeting where each of the 16 departments, I handled the anti-aging department, could present information. And then they would select which of those papers were worthy of going out for peer review and publication. And in this case, I thought that I had made a mistake. And I said, I believe I had made a mistake because every textbook in the world, every nutrition book, dietetics book says that only animal proteins are complete, meaning containing all 8 essential amino acids. These are exogenous, meaning you cannot make these in your body. You have to get them into the body. And therefore, meat and dairy, and meat in its different forms, such as fish and beef, poultry, were what people based their basic 4 food group around, along with starchy foods like flour products, grains, all refined. And I did the math on it. Now, why did I do this? Because when I was visiting Brazil, looking for how people live longer lives, some of them than in America. They had no hospitals, they had no medications. They were living off the land through tradition.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you mentioned Brazil. They're probably among the highest consumers of meat in the world, I would think.
Some are, but others aren't. They don't have availability to it. They might have meat like killing a wild pig, but
Okay,
they don't have regular meat. They don't
I
have
see.
beef.
No factory foods like that.
They don't, none of that. They might have some fish, generally piranha, because it's plentiful. But mainly their diet is beans, gourds, breadfruit, things that are not susceptible to high humidity, high water levels.
Understood.
And anyhow, This one gentleman saw that we were getting sunburn, my brothers and a friend who came with me, and he climbed up a coconut tree, threw down a bunch of coconuts, and climbed back down. Now, normally when you climb trees, I have 2,000 palm trees here on my animal place. I have an animal sanctuary here. I've rescued and found homes, loving homes for life for over 7,500 animals in my career.
Wow.
In any case, that's just a hobby. But when he came down, normally you have cleats. There's special shoes you wear that you can dig into the tree, and there's a belt that you put around, and you have a hook in case you start to fall, you use the hook. This guy had nothing. I mean, nothing. And he was 72 years old. I was in my 20s. And I thought, holy cow, how did that happen? So anyhow, he then took the salve. It looked like a plain gelatin, and he smeared it on our faces and hands, neck. Within a half hour, all the redness was gone. Then he had us drink the raw coconut water. He said, we use this for getting rid of parasites. Anyhow, I came back and I went into the lab, and I said, well, he kept saying they eat beans at every meal. So I went out and I bought some black beans and red beans and kidney beans. So I did an analysis of the amino acid composition. I was thinking I'd find 3 or 4 amino acids. I found all 8 in different that I said, I've made a mistake. So I made a note for Dr. Berman, called me the next day, and I said, Vic, I made a mistake. Would you redo this? So I came in that night, and he said, no mistake. I said, it has to be a mistake, because the book I learned when I became a registered dietitian, Anaclinical Nutrition, was Robinson's Norman Therapeutic Nutrition, major textbook, really good. And it said, and I went back, it said only animal proteins are complete. All others are incomplete, and vegetables are very incomplete, as is fruit. And that's why fruits and vegetables were given so little importance on the food pyramid.
And what year was this experience?
1974.
And so today, though, it's still the prevailing understanding about
It hasn't changed.
Right.
So what I did is I presented my evidence. But before I did that, a Dr. Hillard Fiske at Mount Sinai was a friend of mine. I said, oh, can you see if I made a mistake? And he came back and said, there's no mistake. And I said, well, how's that possible? How is it possible that every scientist in the world in nutrition has been using the wrong formula? So we went back, clear back to where they found what proteins we should have. And it was based upon a mouse study, and mammary milk from the mice had nothing to do with humans and our needs. So anyhow, I presented the paper, and Hillard, he had a computer system I didn't in the lab. He printed out 5,000 food combinations that if you ate those foods in normal serving sizes, you would get more protein that was utilized, what is called net protein utilization, meaning how much of the protein did we actually utilize? And that's what's important. The highest standard in all of nature is the egg. The egg, when you eat an egg, you get the most protein actually going into the cells. Now, spirulina is very good, but most of the things we eat don't give us a whole lot of protein in its usable form. So anyhow, we had all this, and it exceeded the egg. So it set a whole new standard in nutrition science. So I presented it. And here's the takeaway point. The director of the institute and the head of sciences, the two people said, okay, Gary, you think you've created something that revolutionizes nutritional science? I said, well, I'm not saying that. I'm merely saying that they were wrong. And I believe that we have been wrong ever since. And we've been motivated by the manufacturers of these foods, because nobody who's making the amount of money that the food industry makes is going to say they were wrong. Eat something else. Don't eat our steak and chicken. Eat some soybeans. They're not going to do that. It's hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And then they both said the same thing.
What was that?
Now, disprove yourself.
Okay.
So I went back upstairs, and for the next 3 months, everything I could do, including giving it to about 7 other scientists at different places I knew and was friends with, and they all came back and said, it's good. So with that said, we sent it out for peer review. nobody would publish it. They wouldn't reject it. It's like it didn't exist.
Hmm.
That was an eye-opener to how corrupt science is, because a fear of knowing is a fear of doing. So what you don't want to know the outcome, you're not going to ask the question that would give you an outcome. You're not going to open that door. I don't want to know what's behind that door, especially if what I'm doing and my reputation and my deference to people defer to me because I'm professor of this or academic, professor of that or top scientist. You guard your position. And what have we been told time and again in this modern last 50 years? That it's never enough. Success, happiness, whatever you have, get more. Where that goes against all of the spiritual traditions of have a higher quality of life with less. But the more you gain in success or making money, the more you feel you need, the more insecure you become, and the more you have to have people defer to you. Oh, look at Jeff Bezos. He's now the second wealthiest man in the world. But is he a good man? Is he good to his employees? We don't want to ask that question. Oh, Elon Musk now with $303 billion in wealth, the wealthiest person in the history of the world. But is he a good person? He's got, what, 9 or 10 kids with all these different wives? Isn't he thinking about the environment? He flies in a private jet, yet he calls himself an environmentalist. Isn't it interesting that we have one small town in Switzerland where all of the top richest people in the world go each year, Davos, and these individuals then set policy, not just ideas, policy of what the rest of us should believe. That includes the accepting artificial intelligence, accepting eating bugs, including fly larvae as a source of protein. Why? Because one of those people, Bill Gates, has manufacturing facilities now to grow all these insects. Therefore, eat these. Or if you're going to eat a vegan hamburger, eat our vegan hamburger. But that's genetically engineered. How do we know that eating that won't disrupt our current genes? You don't know that, especially after you look at the work of what are known as jumping genes, meaning you insert genes from one species into another species, they can adversely affect the DNA, incorporate it, just like the vaccines are now shown to do. You're getting human DNA in an RNA vaccine, and that's never happened in science or health. And now we suddenly have turbo cancers that can go from just a symptom to full-blown cancer and death in a matter of weeks. One of the people I work with, a nurse whose husband's a doctor, she didn't get vaccinated. He did. They slept, of course, together as husband and wife. So she ends up on the side that is beside him. She gets an inflammation in her breast. And she calls me and says, what is that? I said, go to the hospital, get it checked out. Maybe nothing, but if it's something, then at least you know what you're dealing with. 1 week later, she has stage 4 cancer. That's impossible. And no oncologist in the world ever solved turbo cancers. They don't exist in all of nature, all of medicine. And yet now after the vaccine, they do. And oncologists don't know how to deal with it. There's a positive story on that, but that's a separate discussion to itself, what to do if you've been vaccinated and want to stop the self-replication of the spike protein in your cells. There's a way of doing it to stop the self-organizing lipid particles that clog the veins. A blood clot that kills you as a stroke, embolism, they're tiny. You put one between your fingers and tiny touch, and suddenly it looks like a purple jelly. That's the red blood cell. Now, what are we finding? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet long blood clots, but they're white. And so, did anyone notice this? No, except the morticians. When thousands of morticians couldn't embalm the bodies, they couldn't get the blood out of the body because the arteries and the veins were clogged. And here's this English mortician who cuts open a carotid artery, and you see him pulling out what looks like lots of rubber bands all stuck together. And then he puts them in jars. Then he finds out after about 3 months that over 80% of all of the embalming he's doing, they all have these things in them, these self-organizing nanoparticles. And then Dr. Cole, one of America's leading pathologists, he starts to talk with these morticians. I had sent him some interviews that I did on radio. They got interested. Now, he's so respected that he got all these other morticians, and they had a big conference over in Vienna, in Europe. And now morticians from all over the world started showing this is happening constantly, including in young kids. Now, they were able to save one guy after they took a 6-foot long clot out of him. That had never been done in world history. So now we had a new phenomena. Now, real science, legitimate science, would say we have an anomaly, what is known as of unknown etiology, meaning we don't know what happened here. Let's find out. But we didn't. The entire medical, industrial, scientific, industrial complex was told, stand down. And they did. But there were, fortunately in America, you're always going to find a challenge to the rule of obedience. And about 2,000 scientists and physicians, not knowing each other, Dr. McCullough, the world's leading cardiologist, nephrologist, over 1,000 papers in the national peer-reviewed journals, like you can see them on PubMed, most cited scientists in the world on this topic, the heart. You had Dr. Pierre Corey, also one of the most famous medical doctor scientists. And you had a small group who got together and started finding out what's going on here. And for doing that, they were attacked. The state boards began to decertify their board certifications. That's never happened in American medical history, where you take someone who is very orthodox, pro-vaccine, pro-established, pro-USDA, pro-FDA, pro-everything, and they had developed this reputation, and suddenly, boom, it's collapsed. That's not science. That's political science, and that's weaponizing science, weaponizing medicine. And that's virtually the entire medical industrial complex that makes its money off individual contracts, no big contracts with governmental agencies. They're beholden to that money. They're beholden to that prestige. And the independence, and we do have independent scientists and physicians, they were told, do anything we say not to do, and you'll lose your license. And that what we were told with COVID, and I'll show how this all connects to your question, we were told, stand down. Remember that? Do nothing until your patient becomes so sick, they start turning blue, get them into the hospital, and we'll intubate them and get them on remdesivir, the drug that everybody who went to the hospital got. Now, good science would say, before we give a person intubation, we better ask the pulmonologist, is it their lungs are not working? Because that's what you're saying when you're giving this. And therefore, or is it that they have, let's say, a bronchial pneumonia, in which case shouldn't you be using azithromycin or some antibiotics that can kill the bacteria? Or is it the remdesivir, the drug that Anthony Fauci promoted, the same Anthony Fauci, I might mention, that promoted AZT, one of the most deadly drugs ever given in the United States, that didn't even finish his clinical trials. It was a fraud from beginning to end. In fact, one day coming into my office is a woman named Lynn Nesbitt. She has a stack of documents this high. I said, who are you? She says, Gary, take a look at this. I'm one of the research directors of the AZT clinical trials, University of Rochester, upstate New York. It's all a fraud. There's no double blinding of this. They're opening up their capsules because nobody wants to take a placebo and die, because they've been so brainwashed that you got to take AZT, and they're tasting it. If it's sweet, that's milk sugar, which case they don't take it, and therefore they're all pulling just the AZT. And at that time, they were given 1,700 milligrams a day. Today, anyone who got 1,700 milligrams, the doctor would lose their license for malpractice. But that's what they were doing. And she said, people are dying, and suddenly we're taking them out of the study. Well, you can't do that. Good science, legitimate science, looks at what is. Whether you like the results or don't, they are what they are. You can't manipulate them, but they did manipulate them.
Well, Gary, I think what you're saying is relevant to my question, but I wanted to follow back up with the question about credibility and the question of whether people trust science as a general practice. I think what I'm hearing you say is that in general, people should question authority and question their sources. But how does a layperson, for example, know who to trust? And if we're questioning science so broadly and we're questioning all of the established sources of science, then how do we know who to trust? And if we stop trusting science, where does that leave us?
Okay, you've made a lot of important points, and I respect that. Thank you. That's because of your background, your father's background in health and science. And you could ask your father this. When he was standing in my living room with Steve Dunleavy of the New York Post to be, in effect, a whistleblower coming forward and telling the truth, and that took a lot of courage. I've never forgotten that evening. And then next headlines, was, that there are alternative therapies that are being denied, and a lot of orthodox cancer treatment doesn't work. Well, the entire medical industrial complex doesn't work for the patient as it should. About 12% works, and it's terrific. And I fully support emergency medicine. If you have an accident, if you're in a car wreck, if you have severed your finger, if you have an aneurysm or heart attack, you want American emergency medicine because we save lives. But for all the rest of medicine, it has not been challenged. It has no qualifications for failing and no responsibility for succeeding. As a result, whether your patient dies from using chemotherapy or statins, or you've given them Vioxx because it's a COX-2 inhibitor for pain, like arthritis pain, the manufacturer, all the scientists that made that drug, all the people in that whole corporation that work with that drug knew that it didn't work and that you could increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. They withheld that information. Then the board of directors and all the people who knew they were giving a bad drug, because I went down to Washington and I interviewed Dr. Graham at the FDA, who was gagged, who was set at a desk to do nothing because he found the work that showed that they knew in advance that it was going to kill people, and they put it on the market anyhow. It 4 years, and the FDA knew that because they had their own inside Dr. Graham telling them, and they chose to side with the Vioxx people, Merck. Merck made $12 billion. They paid a fine of $5 billion. So they got to keep their unsavory gains, ill-gotten gains. Nobody went to jail. Nobody's reputation was hurt. The value of the stock of the company when they paid the fine went up. And the guy who ran the company got a bonus. Only in America could you kill 100,000 to 400,000 people with one drug and be given a bonus. That speaks of the entire medical industrial complex, because I hired 2 lawyers and I said, for the next year, every day, you're going to find me how many times does Big Pharma make mistakes that cause people injury or death. And they found hundreds of thousands of examples, tens of billions of dollars paid. Not a single reputation was harmed. Not a single company had to lose money. And just like the tobacco company, they were found guilty, all 7 major companies, and they paid a fine, and the value of the stock went up, even after the 60 minutes expose with the guy who came forward and blew the whistle. When was the last time you heard of any agency of government telling you we've got a problem that we created because we allowed a drug to be approved by a board of advisors, and all those boards have connections, financial connections? Yeah, they might be in a major university. Maybe they're the chairman of a department, and maybe that department chair is given a $10 million a year grant from a pharmaceutical company. That doesn't mean that they are legitimate. It doesn't mean that they're creating good drugs that don't do harm and help people. That's what they're not doing. It's all unmitigated greed. In fact, in order to know who to trust, look at who they don't want you to know about. The person that they try to marginalize, cast out as that person's a stupid person, like Linus Pauling, stupid guy, used to be smart, won 2 unshared Nobel Prizes, one in chemistry, one in peace, but don't trust him. But he's published 500 papers in peer-reviewed journals. Don't trust him. One of the most respected chemists in world history. Don't trust him. Doesn't do any of it because of money. Don't trust him. Why? Because he told you that taking 18,000 milligrams a day, as he does, of vitamin C can help prevent disease. And that would interfere with people who are taking drugs. And I can name you a lot of other people who were honest and decent in their entire history. Their legacy was based upon doing right for everyone. They're non-political. They don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. They want to see you stay well. That's the person you trust. And that's why I trust Robert Kennedy. Do I trust him when it comes to Israel? No. Do I trust him about being a person who is a responsible husband? No. No.
Yeah.
But I do trust him because I've seen him over the last 40 years fight all the major corporations for polluting the rivers, including the Hudson River. And he got them in court and he won. As a result, the Hudson River was cleaned up. I saw him go after Monsanto. I went after Monsanto with my documentary Seeds of Death, showing you the danger of genetically engineered seeds. And what does Monsanto do when they see that I'm going after them with articles and documentaries and broadcasts? Well, they just get their lobbyists going, and suddenly they got a Michael Taylor, who was one of their top attorneys, who suddenly ends up at the USDA and then at the FDA in policymaking positions. How is that fine? But in Washington, when was the last time you heard of an FDA commissioner, CDC commissioner like Judy Gerberding, who was supposed to be overseeing the MMR vaccines to make sure they weren't dangerous, leaves the CDC as the top person and goes to work for the manufacturer of the MMR vaccine and gets a $3 million bonus in stock options. This happens constantly, this revolving door from big industry into government positions, making sure that their government position allows them to protect their business interests, and then goes right back into business at a big bonus. That's been going on for 70 years. As a result, we have had no reform, no honest protection to citizenry. So you can't look within government for people to believe. You can't look within the media for people to believe. Wasn't it Jimmy Kimball who said, 2 people go to the hospital. They both had heart attacks. One's been vaccinated, one hasn't been vaccinated. The vaccinated guy, come on in. The unvaccinated guy, rest in peace. Meaning it's okay to die if you didn't get vaccinated. Howard Stern attacking people. And all these other celebrities attacking people who didn't get vaccinated without even asking. You're a celebrity. You know, you make millions of dollars per picture. You live on the red carpet of life. And if I want to appreciate it and go to the movies and pay my $20 to see you act, that's fine. But why should I listen to you on anything else? Why should I buy Fruit of the Loom underwear because of you? Why should I eat a Nathan hot dog because of you? Why should I buy this car or have this vodka because of you? This is how indoctrinated we are. So we've got to stop being impressed by people that we would normally like or admire in some way. I don't care if you're a great athlete. You're not a great scientist. You're not a great public advocate. When you're advocating for something, how often is that something that, like those Nike shoes, were they made with a living wage to the people who made them? No. And how about the tea? Where was the tea in the tea bags that were sold, or in the coffee shops? Where the coffee beans grown? Or the chocolate? Where were the chocolate gotten? Almost always by exploiting people and their environment. We don't care where it came from. We just care that we want it. We want it now. Don't ask me to think deeper on any topic. I can't do that because I've been conditioned just to react to everything and reason nothing. Well, where do you go in life if you have nothing but reaction, and generally emotional and generally tribal, and generally one that is balkanizing us from the truth? I believe that the person you trust, the person you at least are giving some trust to get information in return, is the person that can show you a life spent on behalf of you. Don't give me euphemisms. Don't give me a Barack Obama who says we need peace and then gets a Nobel Prize winner when we're not even preventing peace, starting 7 wars. Haven't we had enough of that? But evidently not, because look at what happened this last election. Just look at the hypocrisy. But I'm not looking at all the political, social, ideological, because I've challenged that in over 100 articles I've written about critical race theory is racist and wokeism is just brain stupid and all these other little cliches that we live with. I'm looking at, do we have a better quality of life? Are we living a longer life without disease? Are we happy? And if not, why not? Go to the epicenter, go to the foundational dysfunction, because that's where all change has to happen. So one of the reasons I support Robert Kennedy and not Donald Trump, I find, in my opinion, Donald Trump is a person that will not take the time and has shown historically not take the time to look for the truth in what he does, what he says, what he creates. I don't do anything until I look for the truth in what I'm about to do. If it's a relationship, if it's a meal I'm about to eat, if it's a class I'm about to teach, a book I'm about to write, a documentary I'm about to make, I have to find the truth in it. And the truth is, I've never written a book, nor have I ever made a film that I wanted to make. I've made over 100 films. I've written over 100 books. Why is it that I did these? Because I first asked people, what do you need that can help you make a better choice in your life? And when enough people tell you, Gary, we're married and we have this wonderful baby, and but I'm told it has to have 72 vaccines before the age of 6, and I don't understand why. Okay, then I'm going to do a vaccination documentary and show them there's no science, no real science, but there's proprietary science. There's win the Nobel Prize science. There's get grants for the rest of your life from the vaccine maker science. So when you separate out the 6 million scientists we have, and you separate out the 16 million professional class we have, the lawyers, doctors, engineers, architects, professors, and you ask, how does this group of highly educated people and this group over here, the scientists who are creating things are supposed to improve the quality of our life, how is it that they have co-joined to have the money to create artificial intelligence, which is going to put us all in a bad position, take away all of our jobs? Elon Musk even said within 5 years, there are not going to be any more jobs. Artificial intelligence do everything. Just yesterday, the first full lung transplant occurred, all artificial intelligence, and it succeeded. And now think of all the things that we do that artificial intelligence right now can do. Yes, it makes a lot of mistakes. And yes, it's already said the artificial robots with the artificial intelligence in them said, when asked at a demonstration, boy, this didn't work out well. What do you think humans? They should be our slaves. What do you intend to do? Annihilate them. I see. But what if there's an off switch? There is no off switch. We've been hiding coding that we create inside and they can't find it. We have no off switch and we're going to control everything. Now that was done publicly and that tape got out. I'm sure the people who were funding that didn't want that to do, but now the top leaders, all of them who created artificial intelligence, have said, we made mistakes. We started seeing all these mistakes when artificial intelligence was asked the question, tell us all about all the popes. There was no pope mentioned that was real. They had to have trans popes and black popes. There's never been a trans or black pope. And founding father George Washington, they made him African American. That's what happens when you have an entire generation of geeks who get into positions to have their own biases, their own fears, their own fetishes, and they program it in. And no one thought that would happen. And that's all that's happened. And so we're seeing the fallacy of this, and yet there's where the money is, $16 trillion a year. I repeat, $16 trillion a year will be made off artificial intelligence. And how do they promote it? You'll have nothing and you'll be happy. You've heard that, right?
I don't know. I haven't heard that.
Okay, Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum. This is the most powerful group that meets at Davos. And there they have all these future leaders, world leaders. They want a one world government. And their main spokesperson is Dr. Harari. If you want to be frightened by the future, look at his lectures. They're packed with the professional class and the scientific class, because he says that we don't want you thinking, we want to do the thinking for you. And we have the technology, artificial intelligence, to do that now. Just yesterday, the first international program for putting a brain implant in by Elon Musk's company was approved. Now imagine what they can do with artificial intelligence. And think of what that's going to do to all the people who have no jobs, where they're supposed to get their income, how they're supposed to live, buy food. Oh, they're going to digitize the currencies. So when I'm looking at the question you ask, a very legitimate question, who do we trust? How do we know they can be trusted? Are we losing our faith in science? Science is the problem today. When you hear about gain of function research, we find out that's weaponization. We know for a fact now it's weaponization. Then we found out that came through DARPA in the Defense Department. Anthony Fauci was in control of opening up hundreds of these laboratories around the world. There were 23 of them alone in one of the worst, most corrupt countries in the world, in Ukraine. Who told us that? Null, one of America's worst neocons, and who promotes, she was the one, along with Hillary Clinton, promoted the coup in 2014 in Ukraine, in the Russian-speaking Ukrainian section that borders Russia. And they put everyone who's now in power in power. And there was a leaked phone call between her and the ambassador to Ukraine saying, here's who we want and why. Suddenly, we are creating the governments. And the World Economic Forum brags about how, for example, and brag publicly, you can watch this clip, Klaus Schwab bragging about how the Premier of Canada, Trudeau, and his entire cabinet all were his graduates, World Economic Forum's graduates. So was Barack Obama. And so was the former Chancellor of Germany. So now we're understanding when you have BlackRock and State Street and Berkshire Hathaway and Vanguard and Fidelity, they control about $50 trillion in assets, more than anyone else in the world. They're the most powerful people in the world. The President of the United States, the head of IBM, these people are nothing compared to these people. These people own everything, but their name isn't on anything. They control the interests in the company because they are the number one stockholders. And so when you look at what we're buying and eating, the medications we're taking, the vitamins we're taking, they control all that. So why is they not controlling, only giving us healthy foods? They could. They could make organic, sustainable gardening the number one choice, but they make more profit off industrial, chemical, agriculture. They own the chemical companies. They own Monsanto. By the way, who was it, along with two other law firms, that broke this barrier of accountability with Monsanto? Robert Kennedy. He was there. It was his client who got the reward of $260 million. It was later lowered for getting cancer from lymphoma from the spraying Roundup. Roundup that's used by almost everyone who has weeds. I don't use it here, but they use it because they trust. Then this goes to the last question you asked, part of your question. Can we change? Have we lost our trust in science? It is only because things got so bad and the people in charge no longer had to hide their motives. Just a year ago, 2 years ago, before Elon Musk bought Twitter, now X, if you said, I believe that there's a conspiracy between the major social media platforms, Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the others, and governmental agencies say, well, it's just a conspiracy theory. There's no proof of that. Do you have any proof of that? You're just a nut job. And then when Elon bought it, and they brought in and started looking at the inner office memos, whoa, it showed that the FBI had employees working full-time in Twitter, and that the White House was telling them whose information allowed to be on Twitter and who's to ban. And then Facebook and Google changed the algorithms. So if your father wanted to talk about the dangers of 5-fluorouracil and adriamycin, cytoplasma, some of the chemotherapy drugs, the side effects of those versus the benefits, wouldn't find a single thing because the algorithms would have changed. So even this time, when people Googled Donald Trump, it took them over to Harris. That's the algorithms. They've been fined for that. But we didn't know this was facts until it could be proven. Now it's been proven. Now we're proving the Justice Department was weaponized. We've been proven the USDA was weaponized. The National Institute of Health was weaponized. Collins, who headed Health and Human Services, had weaponized it. So if you were a scientist or a physician that criticized COVID, you were destroyed. I mean, destroyed. Careers lost, jobs gone, professorships withdrawn, board certifications gone, can't publish in any literature anymore. Yet they were telling the truth. All of the whistleblowers, Barack Obama persecuted more whistleblowers than all the presidents of the United States combined up till now. And yet he was supposed to be liberal and supposed to be open to people telling the truth. In fact, the truth is, and people now see this, it's galvanized them, it's created a gestalt, an awareness they didn't have before of the truth. When you look at what does a whistleblower do at great jeopardy, and they're really heroic, a whistleblower defines and explains the corruption within a federal agency and how it impacts you. What do we do with these people? We put them in jail. What do we do with the people who are the criminals? If they're exposing, we reward them. Now, in what kind of dystopian nightmare do you see the people committing the crimes being rewarded and the people exposing the crimes being punished as if they were criminal? And yet, where is the outcry from the average American? I don't blame the average American for anything, because I must also, when reasoning, realize that from Edward Bonnet, who was Pasteur's nephew, till today, we've been lied to so consistently that we've created a mass psychosis, groupthink, cult-like mindset. And with that, everything you say, if it is not in alignment and harmonizing with what they're believing, suddenly it's out of balance. There's spastic, there's anger. What do you mean, Gary? Vaccines are not good. Yeah, well, I've written 76 articles showing there's no good science showing that they're safe or effective, and some are not needed at all. Suddenly a person, they can't accept it. You cannot have two truths simultaneously. We're not programmed that way. We should be able to have 1,000 truths. We should be able to say, every thought is allowed on my table. I'll then carefully review them and see which truths I want, because some truths are individual truths, political truths, gangster truths, sexual deviant truths. And then there's universal truths that are based upon a moral, spiritual understanding of whatever you do it as if everyone counts in a good way. We used to have that. George Washington Carver was without question the greatest scientist, inventor in American history. When he died, he still hadn't collected nearly 3 years of back pay from his university. And
yeah, I'm hearing
we
all
don't
of
have
what
that today.
you're putting it together very clearly in terms of the contradiction between objectivity and profit motive. And I also heard and read in your article that you have a very optimistic point of view about the possibility of RFK Jr. to bring positive change to the public health situation. But given that he's going to be working within the Trump administration, and given Trump's history of dismissing officials who have different viewpoints from his or come into conflict with him, do you think that RFK Jr. is going to be able to pursue his own agenda with any kind of autonomy, or is he going to be subject to, the iron fist that Trump's going to rule him with? And we know, I mean, I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that Trump is highly driven by the profit motive. So here you have the president of the United States whose basic philosophy is profit, and you've got someone like RFK coming in working under his administration. Do you really have optimism for his ability to do anything in terms of opening things up, shining some light on some of these issues that relate to profit and how that impacts public health?
I've counseled or coached about 92,000 athletes. Of those, 31,000 began and finished the New York City Marathon. Tens of thousands didn't do marathons, but just wanted to get in shape and do some races. And they did for a period of time. I tried to sense with each one their commitment to see, was that commitment going to be fulfilled? And in about 20 of them, Sid Howard, Thelma Wilson, you had some of the greatest athletes in American history. They are legends. They were athlete of the year. No matter where they raced in the world, they won. But they all had something in common to separate those elite athletes from just exercising people, which is good, and those who would compete, but it was fun. They weren't intending to win the marathon, but they wanted to do it. Something exciting on their bucket list. The ones who made the difference, you could not deter them. No matter what conditions they had, no matter what impairments, they continued to persevere and to get there. And they were happy, wonderful people. And I was glad to be a part of that process. So all I can say is this, that I've seen so many people in life faced with insurmountable odds, mainly stage 4 cancers and the AIDS. And you think, okay, well, sorry, nothing can be done. Now, are you saying nothing can be done to allow this to succeed? Or are you saying you don't have any more you can give? Your protocols are limited, in which case your truth as a medical doctor, your truth as a scientist is that you can't discover what maybe someone else will. Are you allowing them to try what you have tried and failed at? Because if we were honest, the cancer world has failed miserably when you consider how many people are dying versus how many are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars and which ones are succeeding. Because if you rewarded scientists for succeeding, you'd have a handful of scientists. If you rewarded doctors for succeeding, you'd have a handful of doctors. So we're rewarded for failing. And that's also true for Trump. Look, I'm not angry at Trump. I consider him a useful idiot. He does not and has never shown in his career a capacity for real empathy. He has not shown a capacity to be patient, to deconstruct something and to see if it works or is likely to work. But because they tried to kill him, and don't for a second think that that effort to kill was some lone Lee Harvey Oswald nut job. No. Then explain to me who he was talking to when he had the rifle and he had the cell phone in the other hand. Explain to me how they say, well, we can't decipher his calls. You mean the National Security Agency that can decipher anything and records every single phone call coming in from Europe? And these are European calls. If they don't have that in their database, of course they do. So you can either believe those who have an agenda not to share the truth. And oh, by the way, when we were told that the vaccines, everything was going to be transparent, everything was going to be open, and it's going to be 95% effective and safe, then why is it that those same manufacturers went to the FDA and said, you got to protect us? For how long? 76 years. We want you to mandate that nothing about our research and outcomes for the vaccine is made public for 76 years. Well, the average person would say, hold on a second. You want me to take something now that no human being has ever taken based upon science that never existed, and you want to shortcut it, which normally takes 7 to 10 years for a vaccine. You want to do it in 6 months, and you want us to trust you. And here you have all these other lawsuits with all these other drugs that you've had to withdraw from the market, with all these other people that have died or been injured, and you haven't learned anything. You're still doing the same thing. Thousands of lawsuits, but today you're suddenly going to be completely ethical, completely open, completely honest. I may just be an average person with no science background, but I do have an abundance of common sense, so I'm not going to trust you. We didn't. That shows you the power of conditioning. So when you look at the fact they tried to cover up their problems, and just like January 6th, they covered up the truth of it. Everything they covered up because they wanted to maintain power. Donald Trump was the person they couldn't control. So what they do, they got Pompeo, they got all these other deep state actors in there, and everything he did was leaked. Do you remember he had the one call with Zelensky and ask a legitimate question, which was not illegal. What's going on with Burisma? And they were investigating it. But then Joe Biden goes over there and comes back and says, I withheld $1 billion, $1 billion. Unless within 6 hours that I'm here, they fire the person would be equivalent to our attorney general for investigating Burisma. No, they were investigating his son, getting $85,000 a month with another friend of your son's, and who had no background, no experience whatsoever in gas and oil and mining, nothing. And millions of dollars went his way. And so Biden goes over, gives him the money, and then in front, and you see the backdrop, in front of the Council on Foreign Relations, he's sitting there and he says, yeah. So I told him, you got 6 hours. You fire this guy or you don't get the $1 billion. Well, son of a bitch, they fired him. And everybody laughs. Well, did anyone go in and talk with and see what that attorney general was doing? He had loads of corruption material. So when you weaponize the State Department, you weaponize your federal health agencies, you weaponize the media, then how is someone supposed to get their information? Well, the good news is, and this answers the one part of the question was, who are they supposed to believe? They're no longer believing the media. They're no longer believing members of Congress. They're no longer believing the scientific community. I mean, they're finally finding who they can't believe because of the bad experiences. And so many bad experiences have built up that has crushed the sense of confidence in the honest capacity to share. So yeah, they're going to watch you and they're going to believe you because you have a background and a history of not causing harm, of not going along with something because everyone else was. You bring on guests that challenge people. That shows integrity. You bring on people who are not there to entertain your audience, but rather to empower them. That shows character. So what you're doing, and now there's not just one or two sources, there are millions of podcasts, millions. We get inundated every week at the Progressive Radio Network, which I founded, prn.live, and we have the best. We have Ralph Nader. We have Abby Martin. If you're doing something important in the world and you've had a history of doing it, and you're not doing it for the money or power, then you've got a place on our station. And we're the #1 progressive radio station in the world. But with no advertising, no publicity, nothing at all. And that's, in just one of our platforms. We have multiple platforms. We have a letter. You can see it if you go to GaryNull.com, look under Lifetime Achievements, then look under Media. Motivox, one of the largest, wealthiest of the internet stations, was doing almost all business broadcast. All the top business and finance organizations funded it and had their guests on. He asked me one day, would I do it? I said, well, you're all business. He said, but I believe we have to expand out of that. Would you do a show each day? I said, sure. So I did a show, and 3 years later, I get a letter. A letter from David Ide, who discovered the Lycos search engine, and that's how he made his fortune. He sends me a letter. And at the top, it says, 10 million unique monthly listeners to Gary Null Show. He said, we've never seen anything like this. You had 300% increase over our next show. No advertising, no publicity. How's this possible? And I said, because people underestimated the desire of people to know the truth and what links they will go to find it. Now, that's not everybody. But think of half, let's just say for argument's sake, half of Americans are fed up. They've trusted people for decades, good Democrats, good unionists, good civil servants, and they were betrayed. NAFTA, GATT, their jobs were taken, outsourced overseas, and they started to stop listening to what politicians say. We care for you. No, you don't, or you would have done something. So now the average person, the silent majority, is finding its voice. And they say, we don't want any more of this. We're not going to tolerate it. We're going to boycott your products. And now the two sanctuary areas that were not changing, medicine and science, neither one is being trusted now. Because when You go to a New York City hospital for one night. You simply sleep in a bed, no nurse, no doctor, no medicines, no food. It's $1,500. How's that possible? I can get that bed in the Waldorf Astoria, or one of the, not them, they're closed, but one of the big hotels for less. It's because everything has been commodified. The only value we have is as a commodity. We are, as Marshall McLuhan once said, we are the product. So if you don't know what they're trying to market you. That's why they want all the information on you. That's why they illegally surveyed our telephones, our internets. They have everything you've ever said on the phone. They have it recorded. It was done illegally. They violated FISA over 1,000,000 times. 1,000,000 times. The FBI alone did that. So the people that have been in control of our policies and opinions have betrayed us. Now we don't care about what these celebrities think. Oh, and by the way, all of you said you were going to leave America. Hey, catch the next flight out, first class or coach, and see how you like it elsewhere. Ellen DeGeneres is already in her partner in London, but I don't see Barbara Streisand leaving. You're supposed to leave. Why are you still here? Cher, why are you still here? So the hypocrisy of people who think because I'm famous and a star and I get to walk red carpets, that somehow you should defer to me. I'm better than you. No, you're not better than us. You're conceited, ill-tempered, you're disdainful, you're insensitive, and you're entitled. None of those are virtuous. They're all negative. And all you can do is think about yourself. We need people to think about each other. And now the public is looking for those sources. Why do you think Joe Rogan is the second largest podcaster? Dwarfing him is Tucker Carlson. I couldn't stand Tucker Carlson. His pompousness, never knowing, is that a real hairdo or is it a wig? God, that looks strange. But in any case, and Morning Joe has a real strange hairdo, calls himself a Republican. My God, he's more left than AOC. But then he goes down and kisses the ring of Trump. Why? Because he's lost his audience. They've all lost their audience. Half the audience of CNN and MSNBC are gone. So now they're trying to sell CNN, and I believe they're coming up on selling CNBC and MSNBC because there's no audience. Where are these people supposed to work now that we know what their real agenda is, how insensitive they are, how incendiary they are towards people with another opinion? What I loved about Linus Pauling, who is a friend, not just a professional friend, but anytime he come to New York, he'd come by the office, Tri-State Healing Center. And he was always amazed that of my 22 medical staff, we never used a drug. Not once in all the years it was open, thousands of patients. We used only natural ingredients, and we had the highest cure rate that you could find. Even did a documentary called The Cost of Denial, meaning those who denied that there was any other way of treating AIDS except with AZT and antiretrovirals. They were then putting people's lives in jeopardy because those were very toxic. You give a toxic immunosuppressive drug to a person who has autoimmune conditions or immune suppression, you're going to kill them. And that's what happened. But we were building up their immune system with intravenous vitamin C and ozone and herbs and healthy diet and juicing and bitter melon and the right nutrients. And they succeeded. We cured 18 people who were on an advanced protocol and kept 2,000 people with advanced stage back to normal. They were still HIV positive, but they were normal, showing that if they were normal without any medicines, then if they had the HIV virus, then you couldn't blame the HIV virus by itself for killing people because we reversed that without drugs. So it only could have been a contributing factor. In any case, if you ever want me to talk about the letter I wrote to Science Magazine, asking them to retract Gallo's article, Popovican article, I will be happy to do that. That'll take about a half hour. But we saw that the entire foundation upon which AIDS was built was a fraud, a lie. We saw that the entire foundation upon which COVID was built was a fraud and a lie. We saw that their whole vaccine protocol was a fraud and a lie. Even the U.S. Supreme Court said the vaccines are, quote, they are toxic. They're not safe. That's what the Supreme Court said. They're not safe. So if they're not safe, then how unsafe are they? Well, it depends upon the vaccine. And then you start looking at the science in it and you think, my God, Why doesn't every pediatrician, every doctor know this? Because a doctor or scientist is no less able to be indoctrinated into a cult-like mindset and suffer from a similar form of group psychoses, that the only way we're going to deal with cancer is surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. Nothing else works. It's all quackery. But I've got thousands of studies showing that other treatments that are non-toxic work. Well, we can't hear that. So we're just going to deny it, just like they did when I did my article showing we didn't eat meat. Yeah, well, we don't need meat. In fact, interesting enough, when I was a keynote speaker at Equinox at the UN, this guy comes over and this woman comes over and she says, I had the nutrition program for Africa at the UN. I came to your press conference because, by the way, when they finally, after 2 years, I didn't get any previous acceptances, I held a press conference at RFK. Interesting, his father's named high school on the east side. About 800 people came. And I presented all my evidence. And we published a book and called The Egg Project, showing that we could exceed the egg without any animal proteins at all. Then I did The Healthy Vegetarian. And in it, I showed that there's not a single peer-reviewed scientific study showing that if you eat this salami, if you eat this pizza, you're going to live a longer life. You're going to be healthy. It's going to protect you against heart disease. But I have 7,000 studies I can show you by eating green, eating more fruits and vegetables, eating more whole grains, not processed grains, getting rid of all the sugar, caffeine, the dangers of trans fats and saturated fats and arachidonic fats. When you get rid of that and you incorporate this, then you can add 15 years onto your life expectancy. Right now, the life expectancy for a man is 73. That's terrible. There are 39 other countries in the world whose life expectancy is longer and the people are healthier. So if we're spending $5 trillion, which we are this year, on healthcare and none of it is healthy, then we're just giving it away. And that's what we did. If you went into a hospital, they gave you remdesivir, one of the most toxic drugs. It should be banned. In fact, the only study I could find was one done in Africa on Ebola virus. 53 patients died from using it, 53% deaths. So they stopped it. So they stopped the drug because it's so deadly in Africa, and Fauci demands every patient going into hospital gets it. And what's it do? It destroys your kidneys. What happens when your kidneys are destroyed? You get water back up in the lungs. What happens when there's water in the lungs? You get bacterial infections. What happens then? You can't breathe. So do you put them in a hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which you should, and save their life? No, you intubate them. You got and so many pulmonologists came forward and said we were doing the wrong thing. We were killing our patients, but that's what we were told to do. But what if we would have given them ivermectin, which had won the Nobel Prize? I think it was 2014 or 16, and had been used billions of times. Why didn't we use it? Because it was shown that if you took ivermectin, even 12 milligrams, small dose, if you came down with the first symptoms of COVID, you could knock it out. And we would have saved 90% of the lives that were lost. Ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and quercetin, vitamin A, and astragalus. Yeah. Build up the immune system. 24,000 milligrams of intravenous vitamin C done at the Wuhan hospital, not the lab, the hospital. And you could have saved a life because when they did it there on thousands of patients, it knocked it right out. That's a small dose, by the way. I would have gone to 50,000. And so everything that we knew that worked, we chose not to use it. And things that would kill a patient, we used because the hospitals were then told, and this had to come from Collins, head of Health and Human Services, that I'm trying to get, hopefully, Robert Kennedy into. They said, we'll give you a bonus. You give people remdesivir, you get a bonus. If on the death certificate it says died from COVID, even though they died of an embolism or a heart attack or stroke, you get a bonus. It got to where it was all about keeping a person in a hospital and then letting them die with COVID diagnosis. They can get up to $100,000. Well, we know that hospitals and the equity partners that own these hospitals And the hedge funds that own these supplements, they're not in it for the money. They're in it to save lives. Yeah, no, sorry, that doesn't work. They're all in it for the money. So we intentionally allowed nearly 1 million Americans to die and at least 10 million who are adversely affected. But the worst part of it is those people who didn't die from the vaccine will now probably die from the clots. It just takes time, depending upon if you got one vaccine or two. And by the way, that woman I mentioned, the nurse who ended up with turbo cancer, she went on a protocol I gave her. And in 3 months, she tested zero, no cancer in her body. Her husband's still not a believer. But that's that cynicism. Show me something that is the truth and I will abide by the truth. Well, I just showed you something that's the truth. Well, I can't accept it. Why not? Why not disprove your own views and values? So then your final point was, will this mean that Robert Kennedy is going to be met with enormous attacks and therefore not even have a chance to qualify? Because the entire medical community is going to join against him. The entire medical and scientific community, and then all the bureaucracies and the politicians that are given money by the pharmaceutical industry. That's about 90%. So there's a very high probability that he will be rejected by the Senate and not be confirmed. So what then can happen? President Trump can nominate someone to be a czar, to oversee a group, and he can do that. Will he be patient enough to allow this to happen? After all, who is the worst example in the world of someone who has the truth at their hands, has every expert in the world at their hand, and he is taking no advice on diet? President Trump. And unfortunately, Robert Kennedy was in that stupid photograph. Man, Robert, please don't do that again. All right, you're eating McDonald's and drinking a Coca-Cola, and with Trump, he has all the good advice. He won't take it. He won't take the best advice. So the first time around, he allowed all the wrong people around him, business people. And Betty DeVos and all these other people had no background, no experience. This time around, his family, I'm assuming, have said, look, we can't do the same thing. I mean, we created the swamp. We were part of it. You said you were going to get rid of it. Everyone in our cabinet was part of the swamp. So that's why there was an opening for Tulsi Gabbard. Do you think they want Tulsi overseeing all the intelligence agencies? Last thing in the world they want her.
Probably
They'll
not.
do everything they can to destroy Tulsi Gabbard, because she will be the supervisor of the CIA, National Security Agency, and all the other 16 intelligence agencies. She's going to be the head of that. So if she was the head of it, then those 51 former intelligence experts, Brennan and Clapper and all the rest, that said, oh, Hunter Biden laptop, Russian conspiracy. No, it wasn't. They knew that. She wouldn't allow that. And they've got a new pick, the former Attorney General of Florida as a new pick after Gates, dropped out yesterday. And she would be a good Attorney General, and she wouldn't allow the weaponization. So if these people go in who are the outsiders and they're able to clean house, then you got to clean the whole house. You got to clean out everything in the FDA, USDA, and all the other agencies and get good people, qualified people, people who can show you this is what I've done over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Judge me based upon my record of what I've done. And then we would get good people. Then I'm very optimistic. If he doesn't become head of Health and Human Services, he becomes the health czar. Either one of those, he can make major changes, and he will. He's a very courageous person. He's smart. I mean, he's got a history. I've seen that history.
Mm-hmm.
As an environmentalist, I've seen what he did. And I have not seen a single person heading any single agency in my professional career that has done the right thing for the citizens. And yet they're never criticized. They come and then they go, come and go. Their boards, their advisory boards, nobody ever knows their name. They don't know how many of them there are. They come and rubber stamp this drug. Dr. Angel, wonderful human being, I think she's either retired from Harvard now or still at Harvard. But for 22 years, she was head of the New England Journal of Medicine. She said that upwards of 67% of all scientific studies cannot be duplicated. Well, the whole gold standard of a scientific study is if you do a study and give it to someone else, they should do the same identical protocol and come up with similar, close to the same results you have. Then it's legitimate. And when 67% of the studies cannot be replicated, that's junk science. And we're seeing more scientific articles retracted than ever before in our history.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
And we talk a lot about how, it takes $100 million or so to get a drug approved by the FDA, which is an insurmountable challenge for anything in the world of natural medicine and poses a great challenge. And hopefully, I really like your optimism, Gary. I think that I would like to see there be a shakeup in the agencies that we're discussing. And I guess time will tell whether RFK was able to have autonomy and pursue an agenda of shaking things up. I think it's, obviously hasn't even been confirmed for that position yet, and we'll just have to wait and see, and maybe we'll be revisiting this topic. And at this time, I think I'd like to stop and save some of our other interesting discussions for other recordings. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, you're doing a good job and keep it up. We need your voice. We need your platform. And you're very responsible in the guests you bring on, the topics you take on. And also your family is known for being activist for a long time. So I commend you and your whole family. And I want people to watch this, share it with other people. And if they want to hear my radio show each day, just go to prn.live or garynull.com.
Okay.
I look forward to our next discussion.
Yes, same to you. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Always a pleasure to talk with you. For now, for Townsend Letter, I'm Ben Moss. Stay well. This podcast was brought to you by MycoLife, makers of the world's best mushroom extracts. Available exclusively at mycolife.us. Townsend Letter, your subscription means the world.